Hello everyone, Mobius1 here, and in this video I'll be teaching you how to play Fantasy Flight Games' new trading card game, Star Wars Unlimited. Since this game came out in March earlier this year, saying I've been hooked on it is, well, an understatement, and since I've been enjoying it so much, I really want to share some of that enjoyment with you, and what better way to start than a how to play video. While Star Wars Unlimited is officially only a physical card game, a few unofficial methods of playing it online have already popped up. Today, I'll be using Steam's Tabletop Simulator to show you the basics. I'll include a link to the Tabletop Simulator Workshop mod in the video description down below so you can download it for yourselves, and I'll also be adding timestamps to the video description to split the video into chapters to make it easier to navigate. Star Wars Unlimited does have rules for a couple different modes of play, but in this video I'm only going to be going over the Premier game mode, which is the standard and most common game mode. Premier is played between two players using decks that are made up of one leader, one base, and at minimum 50 other additional cards. In those 50 additional cards, you can have at most 3 copies of any single card. The objective in Premier is to be the first player to defeat your opponent's base, and you'll be doing that by battling over 2 separate arenas, ground and space. To begin a game, each player will place their deck's leader and base in the dedicated leader and base zones at the center of the board, then randomly decide who will go first and give that player the initiative counter. After that, each player shuffles their deck and draws 6 cards. Players do have the option to mulligan their hand by shuffling it back into their deck and drawing a new hand of 6 cards. However, if they choose to do that, they must keep their second hand. Once each player has a hand of 6, they must choose 2 of those cards to convert into resources. They do this by playing those cards face down in front of them in a resource zone. Resources will be used to pay for the cards that you play, and each resource is always only worth 1, regardless of what the card actually is. Unless you have very specific cards to bring them back, typically resources remain as such throughout the entirety of the game, so choosing which cards to keep and which to convert into resources is a critical part of your strategy throughout a game, and we'll be talking a little bit about how to make those decisions a little later on. So before we begin playing, why don't we take a look at the different types of cards in Star Wars Unlimited. Currently, there are 5 types of cards in Star Wars Unlimited: leaders, bases, units, upgrades, and events. We'll talk about leaders and bases a little later, but first let's start with the most common type of card in Unlimited: units. Units are divided into 2 categories, either ground or space, and you can tell which category a unit belongs to by looking at the top of the card. This determines, when the unit is played, which arena that unit goes into. The number in the top left corner of the card is its resource cost. This is the number of resources you will have to exhaust in order to play that unit. Beneath the resource cost, you may find several colored icons. These are called aspects, and we'll talk a little bit more about them when we talk about leaders and bases. The red number on the left of the card is the unit's power, or attack. This is how much damage the unit does in combat. The blue number on the right side of the card is the unit's HP, or health. This is how much damage needs to be done to a unit in order to defeat it and send it to the discard pile. In the box beneath the power and HP would be where any abilities that unit had would be listed. For example, we see that this Viper probe droid here has an ability that when you play it, you get to look at your opponent's hand to see what cards they're holding. Just below the art on the unit cards are the unit's traits, and these don't have any immediate impact on the game. However, other card effects might reference traits. For example, if we look at this unit, the Fleet Lieutenant, he allows you to attack with a unit the moment you play him, and in addition, if that unit has the Rebel trait, it gets +2 power for that attack. Next, let's talk about upgrades, and as the name suggests, upgrades are cards that you play to upgrade your units. Just like unit cards, upgrade cards have a resource cost and aspects in the top left corner. However, their power, HP, and traits are located at the bottom of the card. This is because when an upgrade card is played, it is placed beneath a unit card so that its bonus power and HP can be added to the attached unit. Just like unit cards, some upgrade cards have effects on them, such as this one, which not only provides the attached unit +1 power and +1 HP, but also allows you to immediately attack with the unit when you attach it. Another thing worth noting about upgrades is they can be played on any unit in play, including your opponents. For instance, if you take a look at this upgrade, Traitorous, when this upgrade becomes attached to a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less, you take control of it. The next type of card we'll take a look at are events. Events also have a resource cost, aspects, and traits, however, no power or HP values. This is because events, when played, perform some sort of one-time effect and then are immediately discarded. There are many varied and interesting events in Star Wars Unlimited, ranging from spending 1 resource to heal 3 damage from a unit or base to paying 8 resources to defeat every unit on the board. With those out of the way, let's now take a look at leaders and bases. As mentioned earlier, each deck in Premier can have only 1 leader and 1 base. They'll be not only giving your deck some sort of identity, but also will be determining what cards you may want to be putting in your deck. Let's start with bases. In the top left corner, instead of a resource cost, you'll find that base's maximum HP. Bases start the game in play with their maximum HP and cannot be healed above that value. If you reduce your opponent's base's HP to 0 before they do that to yours, you win. In the top right corner of a base, you'll find a single aspect icon. Keep that in mind for now, we'll come back to that in just a sec. Currently, there are 2 different types of bases in Star Wars Unlimited. There are the common bases, which have a maximum HP of 30, and then there are the rare bases, which have a maximum HP of 25, but also have an epic action. An epic action is an action that a player can only use 1 time throughout an entire game. For instance, if we take a look at this base, the Energy Conversion Lab, its epic action allows the player to, at 1 point and only 1 point during the game, play a unit from their hand that costs 6 or less, still paying the resource cost, mind you, but then giving it the keyword ambush for the phase. Now we'll go over ambush and some other keywords a little later in the video, but the point I'm trying to make here is that you'll need to decide whether or not you want to play with a 30 HP base or a base that has a 5 HP handicap, but some sort of once per game ability. And finally, moving on to leader cards. Like bases, leaders do not have a resource cost and begin the game in play in their leader area. Leaders also have traits beneath their art, and to the right of the art, some sort of ability. Each leader's ability is different and can be used multiple times throughout the game. However, like the rare bases we were just looking at in the bottom right of the leader card, they also have a once per game epic action. Each leader's epic action allows you to deploy that leader as a unit once you have a certain number of resources. And note, deploying your leader does not exhaust those resources, you simply need to have them in play in order to use the epic action. As we mentioned before, both bases and leaders have aspect icons in the top right corner of their cards. Let's finally take a look at what those are. There are a total of 6 aspects in Star Wars Unlimited. The blue is Vigilance, the white is Heroism, the yellow is Cunning, green is Command, red is Aggression, and black is Villainy. Both your leader and your base provide you a total of 3 aspects, which help you pay for the cards that you play. If we were to play a card that had an aspect on it that neither our leader nor our base provided, we would have to pay a tax of 2 resources in order to play that card for each aspect icon we were missing. You can see here that our leader Luke Skywalker provides us with the blue Vigilance aspect and the white Heroism aspect, and our base, Administrator's Tower, provides us with the yellow Cunning aspect. We could play this green Squadron A-Wing in our deck, however, because it has the red Aggression aspect, and neither our base nor our leader do, we would have to pay 4 resources to play this A-Wing instead of just the normal 2. Special note that cards with 2 of the same aspect on them, such as this Bendu card, would require, in this case, us to also pay the 2 resource tax, because although Luke Skywalker is giving us 1 blue Vigilance aspect, the only way we could get 2 would be if we were to also be playing a blue base alongside Luke Skywalker. Now that we understand the different types of cards in Star Wars Unlimited, let's actually begin to play a game. Rounds in Unlimited are split between two phases, the action phase and the regroup phase. In most other trading card games, players will take turns doing as many things as they can or playing as many cards as they can before passing control over to their opponent. In Unlimited, players still take turns, they just take turns performing one action at a time. Actions a player can take include playing a card, attacking with a unit, using an action ability, taking the initiative, or passing. Since we've just started the game, let's start by playing a card. After drawing our opening hand of 6 cards and turning 2 of them into resources, we're left with a hand of 4 cards. Now, I don't know about you, but I like X-Wings, and we have one that only costs 2 resources to play, so let's play it. We start by exhausting enough resources to pay for the card that we wish to play, and you indicate a card is exhausted by rotating it 90 degrees. Don't worry, we'll get them back during the regroup phase. Once you've exhausted enough resources to pay for a card, you play it. When playing a unit, you play them directly into the arena in which they belong, in this case space, and units enter play exhausted. This prevents units from attacking or using any abilities which would require them to exhaust during the same round in which they're played. And that's it. We played a card. We took our one action, and control now passes to our opponent. It looks like our opponent had a similar idea and exhausted one of their 2 resources to play a TIE Fighter into the space arena, which, just like our X-Wing, enters play exhausted. Now that our opponent has taken an action, control passes back to us. Let's look at our options. We don't have enough readied resources to pay for any cards in our hand to play, and we don't have any units that are ready and able to attack. Our leader, Luke Skywalker, does have an action ability that we could activate. However, you can see the cost in brackets there includes 1 resource, so unfortunately we can't afford to do that either. Ultimately, this leaves us with only 2 options. We can either take the initiative or pass. The action phase continues alternating back and forth between the players taking 1 action at a time until both players pass consecutively. Only 1 player can choose to take the initiative each round, allowing them to act first in the next round. Even though we already have the initiative, we're done doing pretty much everything that we can do this round, so why don't we be the first player to take the initiative, guaranteeing that we'll keep it going into the next round. It's worth noting, though, that once a player takes the initiative, they are forced to pass for the remainder of the round, meaning their opponent can take as many actions as they'd like. It looks like our opponent exhausted their last remaining resource to play a Death Star Stormtrooper in the ground arena. Technically speaking, after that, control would return to us. However, since we took initiative in the last action, we are forced to pass control immediately back to our opponent. Luckily for us, our opponent's now out of resources and chooses to pass, resulting in 2 consecutive passes, and the action phase ends. Once the action phase ends, we enter the regroup phase. Each player draws 2 cards. Then, starting with the player who has the initiative counter, which in this case is us, each player has the option to convert 1 card in their hand into a resource, and it can be any card in your hand. Does not have to be one of the 2 cards that you just drew. Just like units, resources also enter play exhausted. This is an important note to make because there are other cards in the game that allow you to put them into play as resources. And remember, with the exception of the first 2 resources that you play at the very beginning of the game, you are never forced to resource a card. If you feel you already have enough resources in play, or you really like the cards you have in your hand, you can pass on resourcing a card during the regroup phase. That being said, it's typically a good idea to at least get enough resources in play to deploy your leader. Each player then readies all of their exhausted cards, including resources, units, and their leader if needed, by rotating them upright. And that's the end of the regroup phase and marks the start of round 2. Since we still have the initiative counter, we get to act first. Even though now we have 3 resources in which we could play cards with, let's examine our second choice of actions, attacking with a unit. To attack with a unit, you first must choose which of your readied units you'd like to attack with, and in this case, we only have the 1. We indicate that we're attacking with a unit by first exhausting it. Do remember that if you play a card that allows you to attack with a unit, such as this Fleet Lieutenant that we looked at earlier, you can't attack with a unit that's already exhausted. In Star Wars Unlimited, the attacker gets to decide the target, so let's take a look at the game state. Currently, we're attacking with our Alliance X-Wing in the space arena. Our opponent has a TIE Fighter, also in the space arena, and a Death Star Stormtrooper over in the ground arena. Units in each arena can choose to attack either the opponent's base or opposing units in the same arena, unless otherwise stated. This means our Alliance X-Wing has two choices. It can either attack the enemy base or the opposing TIE Fighter, but not the Death Star Stormtrooper because it's in the other arena. Our Alliance X-Wing has a power of 2, so attacking the enemy base would bring it from 30 HP down to 28. That's 2 points closer to defeating the enemy base, which is how you win the game. But let's consider what would happen if we chose to attack the TIE Fighter instead. When a unit attacks a unit in Star Wars Unlimited, each unit deals damage equal to its power to the other at the same time. This means our Alliance X-Wing would deal 2 damage to the TIE Fighter, and the TIE Fighter would deal 2 damage back to the Alliance X-Wing. The 2 damage to the X-Wing certainly does hurt it, but it's not enough to defeat it considering the X-Wing has 3 HP. The TIE Fighter, however, is not so lucky. With only 1 HP, the 2 damage from the Alliance X-Wing is more than enough to defeat it and send it to the discard pile. So, in this case, our opponent's TIE Fighter is sent to their discard pile, and the 2 damage that is dealt to the X-Wing must be tracked using either some sort of counter or die or anything that both players agree upon. Damage in Star Wars Unlimited is persistent, so the 2 damage dealt to our Alliance X-Wing will stick around, leaving it with only 1 HP remaining for now. However, whenever you do have the opportunity to remove one of your opponent's units without losing one of your own, that's often a good idea. Since we attacked with a unit, control now passes over to our opponent. Uh-oh, it looks like our opponent exhausted all 3 of their resources to play another unit into the ground arena. Let's take a look at it. It looks like they played General Veers, a 3-cost 3/3 unit that says other friendly Imperial units get +1/+1. And if we take a look at the Death Star Stormtrooper unit our opponent already had in play, it does have the Imperial trait, meaning this 3/1 is now a 4/2. It's also worth noting that TIE Fighter we just defeated was also an Imperial unit, meaning had General Veers been played before we attacked, this TIE Fighter would have been buffed to a 3/2, making it an even match for our X-Wing. Since our opponent played a card, control now passes back to us, and I think it's time we punish our opponent for being a little greedy. Let's choose to play a card, and we'll start by exhausting 2 resources to play the card Asteroid Sanctuary. Asteroid Sanctuary is an event card, which means its effect will play out and the card itself will be discarded. The card text reads, exhaust an enemy unit and give a shield token to a friendly unit that costs 3 or less. The first effect is pretty straightforward. We get to exhaust an enemy unit, and since this Death Star Stormtrooper has not yet attacked this round, we can go ahead and exhaust him, making sure that he can't attack until next round. The second part of Asteroid Sanctuary says we get to give a shield token to a friendly unit that costs 3 or less. Our Alliance X-Wing only costs 2, so therefore we can give him a shield token. Shield tokens, along with experience tokens, which we'll talk about a little bit later, are taken from a supply off of the board whenever necessary. Both of these tokens are considered upgrades, and just like the upgrade cards we looked at earlier, are placed beneath a unit when played. So now that we've attached this shield token to the Alliance X-Wing, let's actually read what it does. A shield token says, if damage would be dealt to the attached unit, prevent that damage. If you do, defeat a shield token on it. In essence, what this says is the next time our Alliance X-Wing takes damage, no matter how much damage that is, the shield token will block it, preventing it, and then we'll remove the shield. That's really good for us, considering our Alliance X-Wing only has 1 hit point remaining, but now that it's shielded, no matter how much damage it takes on the next hit, the shield will prevent it and it won't be defeated. Quick note, too, that there is no limit to how many shield tokens a unit can have. Once the event card's effect is done being resolved, the event card is placed in the discard pile. Our opponent missed out on potentially dealing 3 damage to our base because instead of attacking with their Death Star Stormtrooper, they decided to first play a card. However, our clever play was not without consequence either. You see, since we just played an event card, that was our action. Now control passes back to our opponent. Our opponent has no resources with which to play cards and has no units that are ready and able to attack. Therefore, our opponent decides to take the initiative counter, meaning they will be forced to pass for the rest of this phase. However, they will also be the first to act at the beginning of the next round. Control then does return to us, so now it's our turn to take as many actions as we would like before passing and ending the phase. As you can see, we do have one resource left with which we can use to play a card, and we do in our hand have R2-D2, which is a 1-cost ground unit. But we have to remember that our opponent recently played General Veers, which is buffing their Death Star Stormtrooper to a 4-attack, 2-health ground unit. So is it a good idea to put a 1-power, 4-HP unit into play when we know our opponent has a unit that can defeat it, and they have the initiative counter and will be acting first next round? I don't know. Maybe it is. But these are the kinds of decisions that you'll have to make when you're playing Star Wars Unlimited. Now, while we didn't encounter it during our short gameplay demo, let's examine the last action that you can take on your turn, which is use an action ability. Take a look at Alliance Dispatcher. This 1-cost 1/2 unit has an action ability which reads, play a unit from your hand, it costs 1 less. Action abilities will always have their cost shown in brackets. Sometimes that cost might be a resource value, and sometimes it will have this arrow icon. The arrow represents the action of exhausting the card. And as we've discussed previously in the video, that means that if Alliance Dispatcher had become exhausted earlier in the round for any other reason, we would not be able to activate this ability. Similarly, if we do use Alliance Dispatcher's ability and he becomes exhausted, we will not then later in the round be able to attack with him unless we find a way to ready him up again. By the way, epic actions, such as the ones found on the rare bases we looked at earlier and on the leader cards, also count as using an action ability. So if we take a look at the Luke Skywalker leader, we see that their epic action requires us to control 6 or more resources to deploy him. You can see here that I have 6 resource cards in front of me, so on my turn I could use an action to flip the leader card over to its unit side and place it in the ground arena ready. If we look at the top of the card, we now see that this is considered a leader unit, and we know it goes into the ground arena because that's what it says at the top of the card. Every leader in the game currently deploys to the ground arena, however, in the future, who knows? Once deployed, a leader unit behaves just like any other unit card in the game. And if ever defeated, instead of going to the discard pile, the leader is simply flipped back over to its leader side and placed back in the leader zone, exhausted. Additionally, some sort of reminder token or counter should be placed over the epic action text on the card, just as a reminder that that epic action cannot be used again for the rest of this game. And just a final reminder, when you do have enough resources to deploy your leader, you do not need to exhaust those resources to do so. You can deploy your leader and then use those resources to play other cards. Now that you understand how to play Star Wars Unlimited, let's take some time to go over a couple of key bits of extra information. Earlier, when we were talking about shield tokens, I had mentioned experience tokens. Certain cards in the game will have effects such as giving experience tokens to friendly units. Experience tokens, like shield tokens, come from a supply that is kept off the board and just taken from when needed. While shield tokens prevent damage from being done to your units, experience tokens simply add +1 power and +1 HP to the attached unit. Now let's take a look at the red keywords that were introduced during Set 1 for Star Wars Unlimited. Let's start with arguably the easiest keyword to understand in the game, which is Restore. Restore simply restores that much health to your base when this unit attacks. The keyword Shielded means that when this unit enters play, you put a shield token on it. The keyword Raid means that when this unit attacks, it gains that much power. So this Cantina Braggart here may only be a 0-3 unit when it's defending, but it'll be a 2-3 when it's attacking. The keyword Overwhelm means that any excess damage this unit does to an opposing unit is carried over to the opposing player's base. So if this ATST here were to attack a unit with only 3 HP, the first 3 of the ATST's 6 damage would defeat the unit, and the remaining 3 damage would then carry over to the opponent's base. The Grit keyword means that for each damage on a unit, the unit gains that much attack power. So if this Gorilla Attack Pod somehow finds itself with 5 damage on it, sure, it will only have 1 HP remaining, but instead of 4 attack, it will have 9. The keyword Sentinel provides a way to block units from attacking other weaker units or your base. If you're attacking with a ground unit and your opponent has a ground unit with the Sentinel keyword in play, such as this cell block guard here, then you must attack the cell block guard or any other unit in the ground arena that also has Sentinel. Note that ground units with Sentinel do not block space units from attacking and vice versa. One way to deal with Sentinel units is to have units with the Saboteur keyword, which when a unit with the Saboteur keyword attacks, they can ignore units with Sentinel. And on top of that, if a unit with the Saboteur keyword were to attack a unit with shield tokens, not only will that unit deal its damage directly to the shielded unit's health, but it will also defeat all shield tokens on that unit. And lastly, we have the ambush keyword, which allows a unit to, when played, ready up and immediately attack an opposing unit. What's very important to note about the ambush keyword is that it only works if there is an opposing unit that can be attacked. Playing an ambush unit into an empty arena does not allow you to ready that unit and attack the opposing base. Throughout this video, you may have noticed that some units have a tiny diamond icon to the left of their name at the top of the card. This icon indicates that that unit is a unique unit. Now, while you are allowed to run 3 copies of a unique unit in your deck, you are only ever allowed to have 1 copy of a unique unit in play at a time. What not everybody knows, however, is that if you do have a unique unit in play already, you are still allowed to play another copy of that unit. You just then must choose one of those 2 to immediately defeat. There are some niche situations where something like that might be useful. For example, this Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight card has a when played effect to give an enemy unit -3/-3 for the phase, or if a friendly unit was previously defeated this phase, you can give an enemy unit -6/-6. Assuming you already had one of these units in play and another in your hand, if you have the resources to spend, you could still play your second copy of this card in order to use the when played effect, and then you would simply have to choose one of the 2 Luke Skywalkers to defeat. A final note on unique units, there are several leaders in the game that have both a leader version of them as well as a unit version of them. As you can see here, we have on the left the leader Luke Skywalker, and on the right we have the unit Luke Skywalker. According to the rules, because the title beneath the names on these 2 cards, for instance, Luke Skywalker Faithful Friend and Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, because those titles are different, these are not the same card. That means that yes, if you are running a Luke Skywalker deck, you can have Luke Skywalker Faithful Friend and Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight in play at the same time. In Star Wars Unlimited, running out of cards to draw does not mean instant defeat. However, it's pretty close to that. The rule is whenever you go to draw a card, if there are no cards to draw, your base takes 3 damage. And you might recall that in the Regroup Phase, each player must draw 2 cards, which means once your deck runs out, each Regroup Phase, you will be taking 6 damage. As I said in the beginning of this video, I'm absolutely hooked on this game. I can't wait to play more and make some more content for this. So I hope you guys learned enough from this video. If you think I got anything wrong, or if you think there's something else that new players should know as they get into the game, please leave a comment down below. If you're trying to find more people to play with, or if you have any questions or just want to chat about Star Wars Unlimited or really any Star Wars content in general, feel free to join my Discord. The link is in the video description. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to be doing plenty more Star Wars Unlimited content in the future, including new card reviews, deck tech videos, gameplay videos, who knows. I'm even going to try and figure out how to do some box opening or pack opening videos for Set 2 once that comes out. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you found it at all helpful, please leave a like and comment down below. I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you all for watching. Mobius1 here, and I'll see you in the next one.